song was, and I thought, that's appropriate. Bring Christ to broken heart. Thank you all for being here this morning. Appreciate your presence here. At the close of the American Revolution, after the war had been fought and had been won, after the Constitution had been written and ratified toward the end of President George Washington, our first president, toward the end of his terms in office, in 1789, he issued a proclamation. It's been known as the Thanksgiving Proclamation, and he proposed that the fourth Thursday in the month of November, that was going to be coming in a few months, he said should be set aside and dedicated for all citizens to give their thanks to their Creator. And quoting from that proclamation, he said that they should give honor to the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will ever be. It's a pretty inclusive statement there about the goodness of God. Bible writers talked about this principle as well. That's where he got the idea from. The brother of Jesus, James, wrote in James 1:17 that every good thing and every perfect gift is from above. And it comes down to us from the Father of lights. I'd love to do a study on that phrase, the Father of lights. It's a very interesting name for God there, description. But the point that James was making, as President Washington was also making, is that all good, period, comes from God. He is the source. He is the only source. And the converse of that is also true, that nothing good comes apart from Him. Now, in the book of Ecclesiastes, which we're going to be looking at this morning, shows us what life without God brings. And it's not good. I look at the book of Ecclesiastes, and to me, it's far more depressing than the book of Job is. I've already talked about Job previously. Well, no, I guess we'll talk about Job. But we will to consider what life with God is like and what life without God is like. That's really the key to understanding Ecclesiastes. It shows us what life without God is like and what it brings. Now, Solomon was the one who wrote Ecclesiastes. He is the Koheleth, the preacher, as he is described in this book, who is writing this down for the benefit of all of us to read afterward, learning from his mistakes, as it were. The Bible also tells us that Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. He asked God for wisdom that he might be a just and knowledgeable ruler over God's people, and God gave him that wisdom, and he said, I'm going to give you more wisdom than any man has ever had or ever will. Solomon set out to figure out life as the wisest man who ever lived. Looking down to verse 13 in Ecclesiastes of chapter 1. He says, I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. So you see the tone that he's setting already in this. Solomon was set to figure out what life was all about. And he begins this book of advice for us, this book of analysis. He has analyzed all of the things that life has to offer. And he says in verse 1 of chapter 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. How do you feel about it, Solomon? Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. In case there's any mystery about what his point about this is. What conclusion has he reached? Everything is vanity. Everything is pointless and worthless. There is no satisfaction. In verse 17 of chapter 1, he says, I set my mind to know wisdom. He thought maybe wisdom is real. That's where true satisfaction and happiness and peace will be found. I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I realized that this also is striving after the wind. What happens when you reach for the wind? You grab a handful of nothing. He said that's what it's like trying to pursue happiness and find peace and satisfaction in this life by seeking wisdom. Not going to find it there. He says all is vanity. And he didn't, it wasn't for a lack of research. He didn't just give this a glancing thought. He put some real effort into this experiment, into this analysis in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes. He begins in verse 1, just says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So he said, okay, I've set my mind to this task, I've tried wisdom, that didn't work. I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said, of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely and how to take hold of folly, until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives. We tried something else in verse 4. I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves, and I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. And I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold from my heart any pleasure. For my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Solomon says, I tried it all, and it was all pointless. There was no satisfaction without God. He tried everything that man could do, everything the world and this earth has to offer. And he said it was empty. It was a waste of time, a wasted life. Well, if it is true, and it is, that everything without God is vain and pointless, then the reverse is also true. With God, everything is not vain, is not pointless. It is the only satisfaction to ever be had. The big idea we're going to be considering in Ecclesiastes here is that while life without God is pointless and without joy, life with God provides an abundance of things to be thankful for. Because the world just has the same old stuff, just reshuffled around is all it ever is. But God provides us with something far better. Let's begin to look at some of these things that God provides for us in contrast to what the world offers. In chapter 1 and verse 9, Solomon had said, that which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. Again, it's just the same old stuff. But God provides us with something new under the sun. That phrase, under the sun, is repeated all throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. It really sets the tone for the entire book. It really sets the tone for this sermon as well. The things that are under the sun refers to the earthly, the material, the human, and it is contrasted with the heavenly and the eternal and the spiritual, and it's contrasted in a far inferior way. The psalmist says it's all just the same old things that have been here since creation. But God offers us something new. If we look at the end of our Bible, in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 5, when Jesus comes back again for the final judgment, he says there, "Behold, I make all things new." There hasn't been new things since Genesis. But Jesus says, "I make all things new." And the first thing that he makes new is us. You and me. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, "One who is in Christ is a new creature." Something new. And the old things have passed away. That is a glorious picture of our rebirth, our remaking in the image of Christ, where we have our old sins. That old life of sin is buried in the grave of baptism, and we rise to walk in newness of life. We are a new creature. We're a new being. We're not the same as we were. That's a wonderful contrast. So Jesus makes us new, but he also gives us a new perspective. He gives us new eyes, a new vision. When we look through the filter of forgiveness and Christ, we see beauty many times that we did not notice before. And it helps us not to completely, but to at least partially ignore the ugliness and the failure of our past and the ugliness and futility of this earthly life. And we begin to see a little better with those new eyes that we have been given as a new creature. We begin to see God's plan a little better, a little more in focus. We see God's plan at work within us and within the world. So in Christ, with God, we see something new under the sun. Peter, in his second epistle, wrote about how there will be a new heavens and a new earth, and this one will be, the old will pass away. That is the hope of the Christian that we have. Now Solomon, he got a better perspective when he learned how to see things in the framework of God, as opposed to just the earthly. He got a better perspective. We hope that he saw this a little more clearly toward the end of his life. He seems to have wised back up again. He started off really, really smart, got kind of dumb in the middle. He seems to have figured that out before the end came. But even though he got some improvement there, he got a little better perspective, and we can tell that from the tone of the way Ecclesiastes ends up. But he didn't get to experience that rebirth that the New Testament Christian does. Now, after talking about that, it may seem sort of anticlimactic what we're going to talk about next, but I hope it doesn't seem that way. But let's see many more things that we should be thankful for in conjunction with this new creation that we have become. Getting back into the text in chapter 2. In chapter 2 and verse 4. Solomon says that one of the things that he tried to find satisfaction and joy in this life was he built himself houses and palaces and monuments. He said, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. A hope that we have with God is that we have houses that will endure. Whatever we build here is not going to last. Harry and Cheryl can tell you about that. Houses don't grow stronger and nicer over time. It's just the opposite. Solomon was the one who built the temple in Jerusalem, the glorious, gleaming temple, the crown jewel of Jerusalem, where the very presence of God would reside. He built palaces. But even then, God warned him at the outset of his rule, back in 1 Kings chapter 9. 1 Kings chapter 9 and verse 8. God warned Solomon, don't think this is the end all be all here. 1 Kings chapter 9 and verse 8. God said, talking about the temple here, he says, and this house will become a heap of ruins, and everyone who passes by will be astonished and hiss and say, why has the Lord done this to this land and to this house? And they will say, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and adopted other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore the Lord has brought all this adversity on them. There would be a time when, as beautiful as Jerusalem was and the temple was, it was going to be in ruins. And people would say, what happened? What happened to this glorious structure here? And God says they will say in that day that, well, they didn't obey their God. They turned away from him, the God who was blessing them, who was keeping them alive and providing for them. And they turned their back on him, and he turned his back on them, and they ended up in ruins. That's the reason for that. God warned Solomon this glorious temple that he was going to build would not last. The time that God was referring to there happened in 586 BC at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian army. They destroyed the temple. Why did they destroy the temple? For exactly the reasons God said. They forsook him, started following other gods. God finally had enough of it, and he said, all right, you're going into captivity for 70 years for a timeout to learn to get this idolatry out of your system. And the temple was destroyed. That beautiful building, it was all vanity, as Solomon said. It didn't end up lasting at all. God destroyed that temple in 586 BC, and they rebuilt it. And he destroyed it again in 70 AD. Why? Because they rejected the Son of God. They rejected Christ. Jesus was talking with his disciples in the 24th chapter of Matthew, and they were looking at the temple that King Herod had been doing a great expansion and renovation of the temple. He was building more courts and colonnades and beautiful structures to it, adding on to the glorious temple. And this restoration project had been going on for about 40 years or so. And the disciples were looking at Jesus, and they were looking at the Temple Mount there and said, look at the glorious temple. Look how lovely it is, Lord. The stones are so beautiful. And Jesus says, well, you better take a good look, because it's not going to last much longer. And it wouldn't last much longer. That renovation project would continue for many more years until it was completed. And that fully restored, rebuilt, and renovated beautiful temple was only going to be in that perfect state for a few years until 70 AD when the Roman army came in and destroyed the temple again. Jesus said not one stone is going to be left on top of another. They just got it finished, and the Romans came in and destroyed it. That's the futility of building structures and houses for ourselves. Even a house for God, as the temple was. They don't last. But Jesus said in John chapter 14 and verse 2, he said, I go to prepare a home in heaven for you. In my Father's house are many mansions. He goes to prepare a place for us. As great as Solomon was, the house he built lays in ruins. Nothing left today but a wall. But our house, our heavenly home, is built by God, and it will last forever. For that, we should give thanks to God. With God, we have a home that will last, and we also have riches that will last. Something else Solomon tried. He tried riches. He tried enriching himself, and thought maybe that's the pathway to satisfaction and joy in this life, to gather as much wealth as I can. Chapter 2 and verse 8 of Ecclesiastes, it said, I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. Solomon heaped up silver and gold like no other before him. But it didn't last. He said down in verse 18 of chapter 2, Thus I hated all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored, by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. He He said, I don't know if the one coming after me is going to be wiser or not. The one who came after him was his son Rehoboam. And history says that he proved himself to be a Class A bonehead. If I can speak theologically. He ruined it. He increased the taxes on the people. He rejected good, solid advice. And he divided the nation. 10 tribes split off and become the northern kingdom of Israel. Benjamin and Judah stay in the south. The kingdom is divided, and it doesn't get any better from there. It's just constant conflict and war. So all of that wealth that he had accumulated ultimately did Solomon no good. And he realized it. He said, I know that this is what's going to happen. You can't take it with you. He said, the one coming after me is just going to waste it all probably. But even worse than that, maybe, is having no one to leave it to. Over in chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes. In chapter 4 and verse 8, Solomon says here, he writes, there was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother, yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, and for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity, and it is a grievous task. Working, slaving to accumulate as much wealth as he can. He said he doesn't even have anyone to leave it to. So what good is it ultimately going to do? The vanity of riches. He goes on in chapter 5. He continues about this because this is a real problem for humanity. We seem to think if we've got enough money and security laid up that everything is going to be great. In verse 14, the end of verse 13, he said, this is a grievous evil which I have seen under the sun. Riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. When those riches were lost through a bad investment, and he had fathered a son, there was nothing to support him. Well, they say, easy come, easy go. You hear all the time about people who win the lottery and they think their life is going to be fantastic, but they don't change any of their habits or their character, and within a few years they're broke or even worse than they were before. Riches don't, that's not the answer. That's not the ultimate answer to anything. Bad investments, they'll rob you of all that wealth that you worked so hard for. It may have taken you years, decades, and it can be lost in a moment. There's no guarantee with earthly riches. I know someone very well who had a very successful tech company that he had built from the ground up. And he got to a point that it was successful enough and somebody offered to buy it from him for a large sum of money, upwards of $1 million. He sold that business. At a very young age, he thought, man, I am set. Took that money and he invested it in a company in Houston, Texas called Enron. Enron is one of the greatest cautionary tales of investing in. It collapsed. All the investors lost everything. That man who had sold his business at such a healthy profit now ended up going back and working for the very same people that he sold the business to. You can't depend on anything in this life from this earth. Earthly riches are fleeting. But investing in heaven is guaranteed. There is a guaranteed return on investment with that. And the best thing about it is it's portable. You can take it with you. Ecclesiastes 5 and verse 15, Solomon said, as he had come naked from his mother's womb, so will he return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. You can't take it with you. Earthly riches. But Jesus tells us to lay up our treasures where? In heaven. Lay up your treasures in heaven, he told his disciples, because only spiritual treasures are not corrupted, will not waste away. They will not be stolen. They can't be stolen. And he said they also go ahead of us. They're in heaven. That's where they are. They're kept safe and secure. No loss. Nothing that is entrusted to God is ever lost or wasted. Now, earthly treasure is not something that we are guaranteed in this life. But God's justice is something that is guaranteed. But that's not the way we see it on this earth. Something to be grateful for is that justice will be served with God. In chapter 8, in verse 11, Solomon writes, "Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil." So what happens is, they do something wrong, they get away with it, and they say, "Oh, well, I'll do it again." And they do it again, and they get away with it. And they keep getting away with it until they don't. But it's frustrating when there is a crime, a wickedness, a sin that has been committed that causes pain to many people. And we see that there is no punishment. It's frustrating when we see criminals getting chance after chance after chance after chance until something horrific happens. And they say, "Why was this person not put in jail a long time ago? Look at his record. Look at all these convictions." And yet, some lenient judge said, "Well, we'll give him another chance. We'll give him another chance." We all deserve second chances, but we don't need 70 second chances. But that's something that happens among humans here on this earth. It is human men that delay punishment, and that breeds further wickedness, further law-breaking, and that breeds a lot of frustration, and it breeds cynicism. We think, what's the point? Nothing bad ever happens to them. They'll never learn, they'll never change. They just keep getting away with it. So what's the point of even trying? That's a sad state of living here on this earth. Those who are not punished turn around and abuse God's mercy. They abuse God's patience. And we can look at these earthly situations and we see people being taken advantage of. I don't know about you, but that really sticks in my craw when I see people being abused, being taken advantage of. But God is the one being taken advantage of, sometimes those who are abusing His mercy and patience. But that will come to an end. Justice is often very hard to find here on the earth. Just a few years ago, there was a big to-do about, they were talking about the Carr brothers. You remember the infamous Carr brothers and those crimes from some 25 years or so ago. Sitting on death row over there in El Dorado for the evil that they committed. And there was a big stink a few years ago because there was some idea that they were going to bring this about and challenge this sentence that they were given. They were going to maybe even retry the case, and people started freaking out about it because imagine the families of the victims, and they're going to have to go and re-testify. And there's always the chance that one judge, you never know who it might be, they may find some technicality and overturn the sentence, and they may get out of jail. There's always that anxiety and that fear of this great injustice. We know that does happen, unfortunately, in this world. But not with God. With God, there is justice. But here we know that bad things happen to good people all too often. Ecclesiastes chapter 8 verse 14 says, "There is futility which is done on the earth, that there are righteous men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. On the other hand, there are evil men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I say that this too is futility." Amen, Solomon. It's so frustrating. The wicked seem to prosper. That's the way it is here on this earth. But that's not the way it is with God, and it will not always be so. He says in verse 12 of chapter 8, "Although a sinner does evil 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear Him openly. But it will not be well for the evil man, and he will not lengthen his days like a shadow, because he does not fear God." It's going to come back someday. It may not be until this life is over, but it will come. We can depend on that justice. And sometimes that's all that can get us through the injustice we see in this world. Paul told the Roman church to leave room for God's wrath, urging us not to take vengeance for ourselves. But he says, leave room for God's wrath. God hasn't overlooked it. He hasn't forgotten about it. He sees it. He's taken note, and he's going to take care of it in his own way, in his own time. That judgment, that justice will come. And that's something that we should be grateful for. Solomon saw the greatest futility in this life is that there is nothing beyond it without God. Without God, there's nothing. There's nothing after this life. That's the end of the story. But we have hope. We have hope of something beyond this life. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, in verse 1, Solomon writes, "For I have taken all this into my heart to explain it, that righteous men, wise men, and their deeds are in the hand of God. Man does not know whether it will be love or hatred. Anything awaits him. It is the same for all. There is one fate for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good and for the clean and for the unclean, for the man who offers a sacrifice and for the one who does not sacrifice. As the good man is, so is the sinner. As the swearer is, so is the one who is afraid to swear. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that there is one fate for all men. Furthermore, the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil, and insanity is in their hearts throughout their lives. Afterwards, they go to the dead. For whoever is joined with all the living, there is hope. Surely a live dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor do they any longer have a reward, for their memory is forgotten. Indeed, their love, their hate, and their zeal have already perished, and they will no longer have a share in all that is done under the sun. Go then, eat your bread in happiness, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking upon your head. Enjoy life with the woman who you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given you under the sun. For this is your reward in life, and in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might, for there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, where you are going." Sheol, the Hebrew word for the grave. He said that's where everybody ends up. Without God, that's the end. But that is not the end for the one with God. Back in chapter 3 and verse 11, I want you to remember this verse. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 3:11 that God has set eternity in our heart. I just love that statement. God has set eternity in our heart. There is something that is placed within us from our creation, by our Creator, that is a longing for something beyond just this physical, material, temporal life that eventually ends. We know, we hope, we long for that there has got to be something beyond. Got to be something more. And there is. For we who are with God, we will survive beyond this life. There is something more. There is something after. For the dead, he said in verse 5 of chapter 9, he said, their memory is forgotten. Have you ever walked through a cemetery? I spend time, maybe more time in cemeteries than the average person doing funerals and things of such nature. But whenever I do a funeral, I always wander around just a little bit. It's amazing to look and see at the different styles of some of the grave markers, some of the things, some of the statements. You can kind of see certain periods of time where something was sort of in fashion. Certain styles and some of the carvings that are made in there, and you see some things written there. Beloved father, devoted wife, blessed child. You learn some things walking through cemetery, but you look at that and you read some of those names. Maybe it sounds familiar to you. Maybe I know somebody by that last name. I wonder if they're related. But we wonder who they are, but we don't really know. All too often, and it happens when someone passes away. You've got the generation after them, their children. And then after that, the grandchildren. And they still remember Grandma and Grandpa. And they have those memories, and they remember going over to their house or spending holidays or different things. But after that generation, the fourth generation, those who were never able to meet that person, they don't have any memories. And when people die and possessions get distributed, oh, this belongs to your great-grandmother. Like, well, I never met her. That's a nice little table or a quilt or whatever. But I don't have any connection to it because that connection is gone. That was never made. Their memory is lost. But that is not the way it is in heaven. Jesus told Nicodemus in John chapter 3 and verse 15, he said, whoever believes in him will have everlasting life. It's not just whatever the years that we're allotted here on this earth, and then that's it. And then we fade into memory, into oblivion. The one who believes in Jesus has everlasting life. In chapter 7, in verse 1, Solomon writes this. Chapter 7 and verse 1, he says, a good name is better than a good ointment, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Seems a little strange, doesn't it? The day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Not to someone without God. That's it. That's the end of the story. Actually, it's the beginning of torment for eternity. But for the one who has God, the one who has a relationship with God, a fellowship with God, the one whose sins have been forgiven and is able to be in the presence of God, yes, the day of one's death is better than the day of one's physical birth. Because the last day of your earthly life is the first day of your heavenly life. And what a life it will be. In chapter 11, in verse 9, Solomon, you seem to kind of go back and forth. There's some good and bad. You kind of seem a little bit of a roller coaster here. In chapter 11 and verse 9, he says, rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of your young manhood. And follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove grief and anger from your heart, and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. Can I get any amens to that? Woo! I'm 53. I don't by any means consider myself old. But I know the feeling of thinking, woohoo! I got 8 hours of sleep last night. That's great. And your neck goes, yeah, but you did it wrong. Oh, I gotta lean like this all day. Gotta get the ice pack. Age catches up with all of us. And it's like the sled on a tractor pull. It just keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier toward the end. It doesn't get easier. But when we think of what we have, the hope that we have with God in that heavenly life that is, again, beyond this life, the last day of our earthly life is the first day of our heavenly life. What will that life be like? Solomon has said here that our earthly prime, he tells young men, enjoy the time of your prime. When you feel the strongest and most energetic and most confident, he said, enjoy that, because it doesn't last long. It is fleeting. And we know this is true because there are people who spend an awful lot of money and time and effort trying to reclaim that prime. A lot of gym memberships, nutrition programs, surgery, trying to look younger. It doesn't last, and it won't last. And then Solomon has some more great images here for us about the latter years. In chapter 12, as he closes out in chapter 12, in verse 3, he says, in that day, the watchmen of the house tremble, and the mighty men stoop. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few, and those who look through the windows grow dim. And the doors of the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one will arise at the sound of the bird. and all the daughters of song will sing softly. Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home, while mourners go about in the street. He's talking about old age here. After you've lived through this physical life, you get to a point, he says, the watchmen of the house tremble. What do the watchmen do to the house? They protect it. What protects a man? You think of him, strong arms. Though those strong arms start to tremble, they lose that strength. The mighty men stoop. You have noticed how a lot of times when folk get older, osteoporosis and things like that, they'll kind of start to hunch over a little bit. Don't stand up quite as strong and proud as they once did. That's what happens with age. I love this one. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. What do you think he's talking about there? Talking about teeth. There's not a lot of grinding going on there because there ain't a lot of grinders left. They fall out after a while, or if you've got some, they're imitation. And the windows of the house grow dim as the eyes. You don't see out the windows quite as sharply as you once did. In verse 4, he says, the doors of the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding mill is low. Why are they shut? Well, older folks, they don't get out quite as much as they once did. It's a little more of a hassle maybe to get up and out of the car and get ready to go somewhere. So they still go a lot of places. They just kind of stay home. Why is the sound of the grinding mill low? Because the hearing goes. Man, I'm not an old man. I've got artillery ears. And if I don't put these things in or I let the batteries go down, what was that? What? Just ask my wife. She's nodding very emphatically. So your hearing goes. It says, one will arise at the sound of the bird. We have in our house right now, our daughter and our two grandsons stay with us, and one is just turned 16, the other one is 18. And that 16-year-old especially, they're both that way. They get it from their mother. They sleep the sleep of the dead. All I hear is alarm going off. I'm downstairs at the other end of the house, and I can hear it, other end of the house, up the stairs, in his room, closed door, beeping away, just beeping away. And finally, after 15 minutes or so, I'll stomp up there and I go, Braxton, turn off your alarm. Oh, you don't even hear it. How can you not hear that? I've got bad ears. I just said that, right? I've got the bad ears and I can hear that. How do you not notice that? Then a coma. That comatose sleeping. I mean, I can remember those days, but they're long gone. And now, if a car door slams outside, the dog barks, the cat knocks something over, and I wake up at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it's really, really hard to get back to sleep. And sometimes I don't. And as you get older, that just gets worse. You don't have that deep REM sleep. You don't sleep as soundly. And I mean, you've got to really protect that sleep, or you're just not going to get it. So this is what we have to look forward to without God in just this physical life. In verse 5, men are afraid of a high place and terrors of the road. There's increased anxiety. Many times older folks are fearful about driving. People just drive too fast. You ever notice that? That's how you can tell you're getting older too. Anybody that drives slower than you is an idiot. And anybody that drives faster than you is a maniac. There's a lot more maniacs on the road the older you get. Just slow down a little. You want to be a little more cautious. You don't want to take as many risks. You're not in such a big hurry. Almond blossoms are growing. What's the almond blossoms? It's talking about gray hair. Get a little gray up top. The grasshopper drags himself along. Used to hop and jump everywhere. Now he just kind of drags along, Got a cane, a little walker maybe to help that travel. So what happens? What about the caperberry? I have no idea what a caperberry is. The commentaries all said that caperberries were something that was eaten for energy. So, some energetic, this is your 5-hour energy, I guess, and it just doesn't work as well as it once did. But the good news of all of this, closing out this morning, that's what we have to look forward to without God. Just this physical life, that's it. But in heaven, the life that we have, we are eternally in our prime. There's some disagreement, some theological theories about how all this happens. What are we going to look like? What are we going to be like? But I believe at least in a form that we will be at our very best. And that is something that I take great joy in when I think of my departed loved ones, especially those, we all know somebody who really suffered in this life. Infirmities, age, dementia, some of these heartbreaking things, to watch those we love suffer so much. And it should be a great source of joy and gratitude for us to know that that is long, long gone. They are better than they have ever been. And will be that way forever. That's something to be thankful for. So Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. And he figured out the meaning of life. That is, he figured that life has no meaning apart from God. Life has no purpose. Life has no joy and no hope without God in the picture. So we have much to be thankful to God for. He has given us something new under the sun. Something better than the world can ever offer. He has provided us with a home which will endure forever. He's given us a place where we can store the fruits of our labor, and they will last. They will remain, and they will not be lost or given to another or wasted in any way. God promises us certain justice, while the world just lets us down over and over again. But most of all, God gives us hope. He gives us hope of life beyond this one, where we will be forever in our prime and we will enjoy heaven to the fullest. And we long for that day. We should long for that day. But let us spend our remaining time here on earth gratefully giving thanks to God, from whom all blessings flow. But if you wish to receive those blessings, you must become a child of God. You must be fit to be in God's presence for that eternity and that glorious home that He has prepared. That means you must obey the gospel. The mission statement that we have on the wall back there in the entryway says that our mission as a church is to make disciples for Christ. If you don't know what that is, or if you don't know how to do that, or if you want to know more about that, let us help you. Let us study with you. Let us guide you. Let us pray for you. Let us pray with you. We can help you today in any way. Draw closer to God, to experience that joy and peace and hope and purpose that He longs for you to have. And please make that known to us as we stand and sing. Won't you come?